Okay, well then I think we're good to continue. So this is about charting our career paths. And whenever we're charting a path, it's nice to have some sense of where that path is leading, right? So I'd like us to start with a little bit of a visioning exercise. If you can, and you have like other things open that might be distractions, like I just told you a minute ago, I saw a text pop in. Like if you can close out of things, that would be helpful. Um, and I will ask you to kind of settle in. I'll invite you to close your eyes if that feels good to you. You don't have to, if you want to turn off your video, that's certainly fine. I will ask if you're willing that you'll turn it back on when we're having conversation. So it's nice to be able to see you all for that. But just kind of get settled and, maybe notice kind of the space where you are, do our best to kind of let go of all the other things that might be on our mind. And in fact, if you need to take like 2 seconds to just write something down because you're afraid you're going to forget it, that is totally fine. And then let's release all of that. And as I said, just kind of, if you could close your eyes, you can lower your gaze, and I'm going to just hopefully gently walk us through a visualization. So please, throughout this, just make note in your mind, and ultimately we'll jot down of anything you notice. Um, no constraints here, no judgment, just even if something doesn't make sense, maybe it's a little flash of something, just notice it without forcing anything, okay? And don't worry if nothing concrete comes either. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second, just be silent for a moment to let us kind of gather our attention. And now I'm going to invite you to flash forward to your retirement party. And I want you to, or at least I invite you to really put yourself in that space. So kind of look around, feel yourself just like brimming with pride and just this really deep sense of fulfillment as you celebrate and reflect on your career. And as you are taking in the scene, pay attention to where you are, um, who's there with you, any way to sort of engage your senses. Maybe there are things you can even smell in the room, or um, can feel the temperature. Just really embody anything that you're able to take in. And I'm going to pause for a moment to give you a moment to do that. So now that you've had a moment in that space, I want you to look off to the side and see that there is a slideshow that's being projected, and it's continuously looping through highlights of your career. So take a moment to just watch and see what do you see on these slides? And how do you feel watching that slideshow? Okay, when you feel ready, can open your eyes if you've closed them, and take a few minutes just to jot down anything you noticed, anything you'd like to capture. Okay. Let's see if we can return as embodied a way as possible to that retirement party space. Again, if you want to close your eyes, um, and just kind of, again, really, really feel that. Look around, engage your senses, try to put yourself at that space. I'm going to pause for a minute to give you a chance to do that. And now, from this version of you, this future version, I invite you to look back. So you're at the end of your career, and I want you to reflect on your path. So how did you get here? How did you get to this point at the end of your career? What kind of life did you build for yourself? What did you prioritize? Just anything that comes to you. Take a few minutes, and then if you want to jot some things down. So as I set up this next part of the exercise, I want to acknowledge that some of you may have gotten like really specific things, right? Like, oh, great, here's the path, and some of you might be like, I don't know, like some big stuff came up. I'm not sure what it means, or maybe nothing came up, right? All that is fine. So we're going to start from wherever you are, and we're going to use the combination of what came up in the visualization and what you already know about yourself and your preferences. And you can weight those however you want to. And I'm going to ask a series of questions and just ask you to kind of quickly reflect. They're going to be pretty short, and we're not going to give you a whole lot of time for each one, but just jot down what comes to mind again, or any thoughts you have. So all of these are going to be around this charting the course, right? So again, kind of keep yourself in that, think about being at the end of your career and think about how you would have gotten there. So the first thing I'd like to invite you to reflect on is, what activities would you have engaged in to result in the feelings and experiences that you had at that retirement party, right? So what activities between now and then would you have engaged in? And sometimes it's easier to know what activities you would not have engaged in, right? As we saw a moment ago. So you can jot those down too, if that's helpful. The next question is, what skills would you have used? What skills would you have used? What connections would you have cultivated? So connections, what connections would you have cultivated? What values would you have operated by? What values would you have honored? And finally, just what sense you have of the choices that you would have made. And what choices would you have made to arrive at that retirement party ultimately? Okay, so now what I'd like to invite you to do is take all of that, whatever, however much or little you've got written down, and try to boil it down to between 2 and 4 kind of like key things, right? Whether it's might be like one value and one activity or whatever combination, but between 2 and 4 key things. They might combine, right? You might combine some things together, but 2 to 4 key skills, activities, values, etc., that really guided your path. So now what I invite you to do is take your piece of paper or notebook, whatever, and just draw a big circle. And it doesn't matter if it's a good circle. Mine is definitely not a good circle, but it still works. And then put a dot in the center, right? So I don't know if you can see that really, not really, but big circle with a dot. And then we're going to make a few smaller sort of concentric circles. So in this with the same center point. So we want to ultimately have, we're going to divide this into thirds. Basically, it's not really thirds, but like, so we're going to put a small circle about a third of the way out, and then a slightly bigger circle about 2/3 of the way out. It's a terrible diagram, but can you kind of see how I'm doing this? Very uneven, but do you sort of get the idea? We're basically drawing 3 concentric circles. So like a big circle, dot in the middle, and then kind of make the rings so that it's sort of like a outer ring, a second one, a middle one, like a target. This is the one I did the other day. It looks better, but it's on paper, like I used scratch paper so you can see the writing through it, but you kind of see, ignore the lines. The lines aren't there yet, but. And now we're going to take, so we're thinking of this as a wheel, and we're going to create the spokes of the wheel. So if you had 2 kind of key things that you came up with, then you're basically just going to draw a line, really just like splitting this into 2, kind of going across the diameter of the circle. You know, just sort of like this. So you'll have 2 halves. If you had 3, then you're going to do something like that with 3 spokes. And if you had 4, you're going to have 4 spokes. You're splitting it into 4. Does that make sense? And then on the outside of the circle, go ahead and write down in the section and that segment what that focus was on the outside. So, you know, if it was a particular value, just write that value in that section. Like, let's suppose that one of my, you know, things that I settled on was integrity. That was guiding everything. Then I would put integrity here on the outside, and that associates with that segment. And then I would put another one here. So I want us, so we can think of this as kind of like the wheel that is taking us where we're headed. And I want to kind of assess the condition of the wheel based on where we are right now. So that's what each of these 3 sort of circles, it's like 3 levels. So we can think about being solidly on track. That would mean we've got the full use of that wheel. So that segment would be shaded in all the way to the outside. We could think about being kind of middle of the road, like could go either way. That would then, that segment we would be using to the middle, that middle line. I can show you a picture here, what I mean. And then we could also think about being kind of like, maybe we're going astray a little bit. We're not quite honoring that, which is going to put it in the smallest ring, right? So this is like going astray. This is middle of the road. This is solidly on track. So I want you to just shade each segment according to your assessment of where you are right now in relation to that particular value, skill, activity, whatever it is that you chose. So now, if we're thinking about this sort of metaphorically, this is a wheel that's going to take us where we're trying to go. There are kind of 2 things that we could think about doing to improve the state of the wheel, right? One is we could smooth it out because it's not going to be very easy to be riding on a wheel that's like all bumpy at all different levels, right? And we can also think about trying to enlarge the wheel, right? So bigger is better when we're trying to move, and smoother is better. So what I'd like us each to do is to pick one area, one sort of segment of that wheel to focus on. It doesn't have to be the one that was the lowest. I mean, it can be anything. You can choose it based on just where your energy is going right now, something that's attracting your energy. pick one area to focus on, and then I'm going to just take us through a couple of questions, and then we'll share out together at the end, and that'll be that. So I want you to imagine taking that chosen area and increasing the size of that shaded part by like epsilon, if that has meaning to you, by something really tiny. Okay. We're not trying to like bump it all the way out to, solidly on track if it's not there. If it is already solidly on track and it's still drawing your attention, great. Let's think about enhancing it even more, right? But we're not trying to make huge leaps here, just like a teeny tiny little thing. And what I want to ask you is to consider like, what is the next step that you could take with that goal of increasing that shaded area just by a tiny bit? Just by a tiny bit. What is the next step that you could take? And once you have a sense of a next step, again, to just increase that a tiny bit, right? We're not like flashing way forward out into the future right now. This is just very immediate, not necessarily in time, but in space. um, I will ask though, if you have a sense of when you might take that step, it can be helpful to articulate that. So I will ask, when will you take that step? What obstacles you anticipate, if any, in taking that step. And not only the obstacles, but how you will overcome them. So I'll pause for a moment while you can give you a chance to think about that. And in connection to obstacles or just taking the step, I also encourage you to think about what support you need and where you can find that support. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to think through a very small next step, hopefully one that feels pretty doable, especially now that you've thought through the potential obstacles and how you might overcome those and what kind of support you need. So ideally, you feel ready to set a little bit of a time frame for that, at least maybe for starting, if not for completing it. And my hope is that that will help you continue to build out that wheel that's going to take you exactly where you want to go in your career, no matter how clear or foggy that is right now. So really trust yourself and trust in that process of discovery. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being you.